back, YouTube, and Happy New Year to all. Thank you so much for supporting me. I'm so happy we are growing exponentially fast on this platform. And for those who do not know me, hi, my name is Noah. I am a spooky spiritualist, and on my channel, we talk about death, true crime, spiritual reparations, haunted people, places, and things, and how you can fuck around and find out. If you are not subscribed to my channel, the tea be hot over here. I highly recommend that you do so now. And if you are subscribed and your notification bell isn't on, what are we really doing, sis, bro? Go ahead and turn it on now. On today's episode, we are going to be going over a phenomenon that I knew existed, but I didn't know so many people had experienced this. And that is death calls, spirit calls, calls from deceased loved ones. Okay, so we're going to go over that because it's a phenomenon that needs to be talked about because it happens more than you think. We are going to be reading some stories from online. We're going to be sharing some TikToks, and I'm going to be weighing in on a lot of the things that we see today because this is actually very common. In my research for this video, I was genuinely surprised at how many people had said that this happened to them. And of course, we as humans don't expect to be communicating or get communication from the dead from your cell phone or whatever the case is. We expect to see the ghost, the spirit in the flesh. Or maybe not the flesh, but y'all know what I mean. You don't expect to get a phone call from your deceased granny. That's not how any of this is supposed to work. So let's get into it. I will be linking all of my sources, creators, websites, forums in the description of this video because I love to give credit where credit is due. So make sure that you check these websites out, these forums, the creators, if they're TikTok creators, go ahead and follow them. It really helps their platform. This first story was submitted by a woman named Janae S. And it tells about the time that her eldest brother got a phone call from a confused spirit from beyond. This happened to my older brother Matt about a year ago, just a few weeks after my eldest brother Jeremy's best friend Joe died of a heart attack. Matt received a telephone call from a person that sounded exactly like Joe. He said something like, "Matt, it's Joe. Is Jeremy home? Something really strange is going on." Matt freaked out and could hardly answer. "No, he's not. Sorry," and then hung up. And Matt looked at the caller ID. It read out of area. So Matt tried to star 69, but they were unable to trace the call. We never got another telephone call from Joe. It still scares Matt to think of it. Let me tell you something, as a spiritualist. When people die suddenly and unexpectedly, their spirit sometimes gets a little bit confused. They don't realize they're dead. Or if they do realize that they're dead, they are in this sense of roaming because they weren't ready. And I say ready to go. Sometimes you can't accept the fact that this is happening to you. So it doesn't surprise me that this person who was probably relatively young passed away unexpectedly from a heart problem, heart attack, or whatever the case is, and he's still trying to reach out to the world that he knew to be factual. Next story comes from a user named Leroy L. And it talks about how his husband's grandfather has been trying to communicate. My husband lost his grandfather a long time ago, but just recently he has been experiencing something really weird. He has seen his grandfather's name on our caller ID, so we thought someone was calling from his grandfather's house. That was the first time and no one was even home. Just today, for the second time, he was at work and clearly, along with coworkers, heard the phone ring. He answered it on the first ring but only heard a dial tone. When he looked at the phone's directory, which has no caller ID, but lists who called, he saw his grandfather's name again. What could this mean? How could it be happening? I'll tell you how. Whenever spirits, ancestors are trying to reach out to you, it is something that you need to do. There is something that needs to be done. Ancestors just don't randomly try to communicate with you. They are either trying to warn you or tell you to do something that you need to be doing. Okay? So if Leroy L is watching this. Tell your husband I said that he really needs to either seek divination, go to a medium, or really evaluate a problem or situation in his life because his pawpaw is trying to tell him it's time to wrap that portion up. This next story kind of gave me goosebumps. It's from a woman named Mary B that is telling a story that one of her clients told her, and her client was a social services worker. And it gave me goosebumps because a lot of us in the United States need help. And the title of this story actually is Money is Useless Here. Just listen. One of my clients related this story to me a few years ago. At the time, she worked for the Department of Social Services, and one of the services she offered was for checked emergency expenses. She had issued a check for $100 to one of her clients for utilities and was about to close the file when her phone rang. On the line was the woman whom the check was issued to. The woman sounded vague and distracted, but clearly said, "I won't be needing that $100 after all." My client made note of it and went on with her work. That evening, when she made it home, she was reading the newspaper when she saw the obituary of the woman she had talked to on the phone. She had died the previous day. Okay. This gave me chills, and it still does reading it again, because out of all the things that Spirit decided to do was to call the person that helped her, the last person that helped her, and let her know, like, your services will no longer be needed. And it just proves that a lot of people go through a lot of things. And the fact that she chose this woman as her last phone call is astonishing. It just proves that maybe she didn't have any family. And since this woman was so generous and helped her, that this is who she chose to communicate with. Ashe. The next story is from a user named Bonnie O, and she describes a call she got from her deceased mother, basically trying to wish her a Merry Christmas and then getting an attitude because she didn't believe it was her. Listen. 3 years ago, my mother passed away. We were very close and I miss her daily. Last Christmas evening, I went to bed and I woke up to the phone ringing. I answered it and a voice that was very familiar to me said, "Hello there." It was my mother's voice. The line had static noise and the sound cut in and out. I said, "This can't be you, Mom. You're dead." She said, "Oh, come on now." She sounded a bit agitated and then we were cut off. My 16-year-old daughter was sleeping in the next room and also heard the phone ring that night. I know it was my mother's voice. She has a Norwegian accent. It was her. Absolutely, it was her. Let me just go ahead and put it out there. I believe you, Bonnie O. I believe you 1000%. Notice with a lot of these stories, we have the same complaint being repeated over and over. The calls come in staticky. They cut in and out. It's almost like it's a really, really bad reception. And this is a ongoing thing that everybody pretty much says happens if they actually get on the phone with their loved one. So I believe you. And Mom just wanted to give you a little solace in knowing that she's okay, for one, and that she misses you. That's all that call was. It was just confirmation that she's still around. She still looks after you. This next story was submitted by a user named Vicky H. I'm not so sure about this one. Y'all leave it down in the comments what you think this was. But me and my experience, I'm not convinced that this was what she suspects it was. Maybe, but just listen. About 3 nights ago, my husband got a phone call at 1:57 a.m. I remember it was a very stormy night. He answered and the phone was giving him little bleeps, but nobody would say anything. Then the phone went dead. I was asleep by the phone, but I never heard it ring, and I always hear the phone ring, only he heard it. He called the number back on the caller ID and it said, "This number is not in service. The number is still on our caller ID." The same night at 4 a.m., his mother, who lives about an hour away, also got a phone call. Her son, who was asleep in the house, also never heard the phone ring. She heard the same bleeps and it was the same caller ID. She called it back and it was also a not in service number. About 5 a.m., his mother was lying in bed and saw a man standing at the foot of her bed looking at her. She said he was tall, thin, and with dark eyes and dark clothes. She stared at him for a minute and then he darted across the room and disappeared. We are very freaked out about this and cannot figure out why this happened all on the same night and nothing like this has happened before. Why did I not hear the phone ring and my husband did? The phone is right next to our bed. My husband lost his brother about 6 months ago, a tragic death. So the reason why I'm not so sure of what's what, I think two things are going on at the same time. Do I believe the phone call was from the deceased brother? Yes. Do I believe the entity in the mom's room was the deceased brother? No. Okay, sometimes, like I said, our deceased ancestors or kinfolk will try to deliver messages, warnings, what have you. Now, a mother will always know her son. A mother will always know her child. That was not her child. So it's just so coincidental that at the very same times or around the same times that her and her living son got the same type of phone calls. I feel like this was 100% a warning. This next one is submitted by a user named Crystal S. And she recalls a time that she called a friend's house and spoke with a dead woman. And I'm assuming this was in either the 90s or 2000s because she does mention a phone book and ain't nobody using a phone book nowadays. Listen, I just found out that one of my phone calls the other day was a dead lady. I was at my mom's house and I was calling a friend who lived nearby. She was at her cousin's house, so I looked up the phone number in the phone book. It was the only Owens in the phone book, so I knew it was my friend's cousin's number. I called it and it didn't even ring, but an old lady answered. She said, "Hello?" I asked, "Is Amelia there?" Amelia is my friend Jessica's cousin. The old lady said, "No, dear, Amelia isn't here, sweetie. I should be expecting her any minute now." So I thought nothing of it and hung up. I thought they left for a bit. I knew Amelia lived with her mom at her grandparents' house. What I didn't know is what I found out when I talked to Jessica. I told Jessica about it and she said Amelia's grandma is dead. And we were there all day long. We were sitting right by the phone and it never rang. Like I said, sometimes the dead like to intercept things because either they don't understand the concept of passing or they're stuck in our realm. I promise you I would tell you a story, but I'll never tell you a lie. This is absolutely what's going on, and because this spirit came as as malevolent, I don't think it's anything harmful. The spirit probably watches over the family in the house, wandering around doing things as she normally would. So, Ashe, I don't feel any ill intent from this ancestor. This next submission comes from a user named Claire E. And she is telling about a time she was on vacation in North Wales in the UK and something strange happened when she left her cottage. Listen, I was staying at a cottage in North Wales, UK in 1997. The cottage was owned by my best friend's grandfather and was in a fairly isolated location, but still on the tracks which led to the main road. It was very basic, but it had electricity and a broiler for hot water, although no central heating. It was a double 3-bedroom property with no outhouses. There were 6 of us staying in this cottage one Easter weekend, and we spent much of our time lazing around and visiting local sites of interest. We decided on Saturday morning to go out to the local market, calling off for a pub lunch on the way back. While sitting at the pub eating our meal, other friends who were staying in a nearby town entered the pub and sat at our table, saying that they were glad we were still here and had missed us. When asked how on earth they knew where we were, they said they phoned the cottage where we were staying and the lady who answered on the phone told them. What fucking lady? Who? There was no one else staying at the cottage, and there was no cleaner or any other person tied to the cottage. I spent the remainder of our time there sleeping with the hall lights on and have never returned. I don't blame you, Claire. This is not your house. This is not your cottage. I don't blame you, because what spirit is tied to this cottage? It's weird. It's weird. This is a remote cottage that is not easily accessible. It is, but it's not. It's very much so in the rural areas. I wouldn't. This next story is submitted by a user named Mary. And before we even get into it, shout out to all my call center workers. I come from call centers, and sometimes calls can be very, very trying. But we never expect to get a ghost on the line. Listen to Mary's story. I've never been a believer in ghosts, but after what happened to me, I can't help but reconsider my position on this. I am a telephone sales representative, and at the time of this occurrence, I was marketing a phone service. Here's what happened to me at work. On Thursday, April 26th, I made a sales call to Pennsylvania. It started off like any other call. Yes, I need to speak to Mr. or Mrs. B. The woman identified herself as Mrs. B, and I continued on with the normal sales call. She seemed very interested and asked a lot of questions, but when it came to the decision-making part, she quickly stopped me, insisting that I speak with her husband. Her objections were the same every time I attempted to close. She explained that she had tried to get him to change phone carriers before, but in her words, he was married to AT&T and refused to make any changes. She also quickly pointed out that since his retirement, he spent a great deal of time fishing and was not easy to get in touch with, and it would be best to try it in the early morning before he left for his favorite hobby. She also indicated that their long-distance bills were getting out of hand because he made lengthy calls to North Carolina and felt the plan would be beneficial to them. On that note, I decided perhaps this was worth a call back and told her I would call her husband the next day. The next day, I made that call that I will probably never forget. On the callback, the husband did answer the phone. I introduced myself in the normal fashion and explained that I had been talking to his wife the previous day, and she had suggested that I speak to him. You can imagine the shock and horror when he distraughtly stated to me, "Lady, I don't know who you were talking to, but my wife died and I am not in the mood to speak with anyone." With that, I quickly hung up the phone. It's not funny. What? Now we're going to get into some of the TikTok videos that I found regarding ghost calls. And some of them really surprised me. Okay, I am a spiritualist, but like I said in the beginning of this video, I didn't know how common this was. So I wanted to share some of the things that I found on TikTok. Please, please, please make sure you are following these creators. I'm going to link the videos and the creators in the description of this video because, like I said, credit is due because some of them have some piping hot tea. This first TikTok video that I'm going to share comes from a user named Avery.AfterDark, and she is telling a story about a man who was in a tragic train accident and they could not find his body or any of his belongings, and so he decided to reach out. Take a look.
Was his spirit calling from beyond to say goodbye? These are the mysterious Charles Peck ghost calls. On September 12, 2008, a Metrolink collided head-on with a freight train in Chatsworth, California. The accident was one of the worst in history, with 25 lost and another 135 people injured. One of the people lost in the accident was 49-year-old Charles Peck, who was in LA for a job interview. Charles was trying to move to California to be with his fiancée who lived there. Tragically, he was in one of the closest spots of impact. What's really mysterious is that after the crash, Charles's phone called a number of people, including his sons, his fiancée, and his brother. Every one of the calls were a few seconds of silence and then a hang-up. To this day, no one knows how those calls were made, but some believe it was Charles's spirit calling his loved ones to say a final goodbye. This story really gives me chills. How about you? Follow for more stories like this and check out the Avery After Dark podcast.
I truly believe that this man not only was trying to say his final goodbyes, but was trying to let them know where his body was. There is more to that story, but that deserves its own TikTok, not YouTube video. It deserves its own TikTok. Because it is not enough information to put on this platform. But if you ever want to learn more, look up that man's case. It's very, very interesting. The next video comes from a TikTok user named Seven Souls Paranormal TV, and she talks about a man who in 1969 was getting communication from his dead grandmother via phone calls. Take a look. Again, a blatant example of when the dead don't realize that they are past. The phone call stopped after a couple of days, and I truly believe one of her spirit guides' ancestors is probably like, sis, you don't belong in that realm anymore. Let's go ahead and go towards the light, if you will. These next couple TikToks come from a user whose screen name is Bougie Habibi. And he is telling about the time that his deceased uncle was trying to communicate with him, and he has the voicemail that he left him. Okay, I'm going to take the sound out of this video because, like I said before, I keep getting in trouble on this platform about sounds, and I don't want the drama. All right. So I'm going to add it in. Just know his lips are moving and saying nothing. He's just doing a trend. So it doesn't affect what the video is about. Just look for yourself. I don't know what kind of spiritual reparations his uncle is paying right now, but this is probably one of the only videos that I've seen where a spirit is clearly saying, "Help me." I don't know. It could be that the uncle just wasn't ready to go, but it's giving that he's getting his ass tapped in the spiritual realm, in my opinion. Respectfully, of course. But I hope that everything that the uncle may be going through has subsided. The activity subsided for him, so I'm assuming that it did. This next TikTok kind of made me laugh. It comes from a user named Shadow Moons, and she is showing us or letting us hear a voicemail that she got from her deceased stepdad. And it sounds like this spirit had a sense of humor. Just watch.
Thinking about how my stepdad called us after he died in an accident in 2012. He died April 2012, and this message happened August 2012.
You have one old message. Thursday, 1:35 p.m.
Who? Who?
End of messages.
Actually, I'm sure he had a sense of humor because to be like, guess who? First of all, Dad, you're scaring the shit out of me. Stop. But the fact that he kind of popped in and wanted to put a smile on their face, which I'm pretty sure they were freaked the fuck out. I would be. Just tells us that spirit is the same as they were in life on the other side. They still have the same attributes about them. So I thought this one was a little bit more lighthearted and funny because I know they probably were freaked out, but me being a bystander cackled. Okay. When I say cackled, meaning like, sir, out of all the things you could have left on that voicemail, guess who was it? I can't. Now, this next one, I feel a little sad because we all have to get elderly one day. We all have to grow old one day. And our partners, either we're going to go before them or they're going to go before us. This TikTok user who goes by the handle Girl Slingshot Ride reposts a story about a elderly woman who was confusing 911 for her deceased husband, but there was a little bit of a shocker in all of this. Take a look.
This is why you may get a call from the afterlife. In 2010, a husband died, leaving the wife alone in the house. A couple of days later, the woman began calling 911 for basic mundane tasks. The dispatchers were respectful of her since she was showing clear signs of dementia. They tell the woman you cannot call unless it's an emergency. She eventually understands, apologizes, and hangs up. Shortly, the woman called. Thinking it was her deceased husband, she asked, "John, where are you?" 911 would tell her respectfully not to call unless it's an emergency and to call her family. She called again in distress, asking John to please help me. This time they would send first responders out to her house. They found a woman upstairs and she had recently passed away, but the calls continued. She would continue to call for help multiple times a week, and each call she did had a unique conversation. Police began contacting the phone companies, checking her house, anything they can think of to try and figure out who is making these calls. The house was broken into and burned down, yet the calls continued for well over a year they did, until one day it suddenly stopped.
Meemaw was just doing what she did in life. Like I said, the dead sometimes get a little cross-wired or confused. And I noticed that it said a year in the description. After this whole debacle had happened, the phone call stopped. And I'm hoping it's because she made her way to the light and realized, hey, I am dead. I should go hang out with my other ancestors at this point, right? That's what I pray happened with Meemaw. This next creator, I really feel for her. It's a young woman on TikTok by Leslie MMAA, and she recently lost her boyfriend and began receiving calls from him.
No.
Yes.
No. Lori. What? You're being mean. Stop it. Stop it.
Obviously, this was a young man who probably did not expect to pass. And I suspect that he's just giving her a little solace and knowing that he's still around. Do I think that he may be stuck earthbound? No. I think since it was such a sudden pass, and on her page, they seemed like they were deeply in love with each other, that he just wanted to let her know, I am here, I'm okay, and you will be okay too. This next video comes from a TikTok user named Grown Jinser. There we go. It is a person that is not in the US, but it is telling about a time that she got a phone call from her deceased grandmother. Okay, and she provides screenshots, baby. She got receipts. Now, I am going to mute the sound. Her lips are moving, but they're not saying anything. She's participating in a trend, and I always get in trouble for them trendy sounds. And I don't want the drama, like I said a little bit earlier, but just watch. That picture of her and her grandma that she used as the contact for her grandmother was absolutely adorable. This is just spirit saying, I'm okay. Okay. This is not anything to fear. That is all for today, YouTube. Thank you so much for being here. And if you made it to the end of this video, if you have a spiritual reparation story, haunted people, places, or thing story, please email me. I'm going to leave my email in the description of this video. I have gotten a lot of emails from you guys. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I have not forgot about any of you, but I have something special for those stories. So If you are interested in submitting a story, email me. I do email back, okay? I do communicate back. I'm also going to be pinning my socials in the comments so that you guys can follow me on other platforms. But until next time, do good, be good, and stay safe.